You know, this is a very interesting thing.
Yeah.
As I was listening to Dr. Chandra talk about the factors, how one orders these things, I guess, says a lot about one's own politics. Could one start with the regional Arab politics and what has turned into, in some ways, a regional Cold War, whether we call it West Asia or the Middle East? Who's responsible for this? The West is not innocent in any of this whatsoever. It never has been, and it probably never will be, unfortunately. And I don't really think that there is a lot of awareness of the extent to which we have created the chaos. You were talking about the failure of Iraq and the problems in Iraq. I mean, the embargo that even preceded the invasion did such a damage to the economy and to the civil structure of the state that that doesn't even rise to the radar screen of most people outside of that region. People don't understand how soft the country became even before the invasion happened. But let me just say something about, I mean, I think Israel is, gosh, what would we do if there weren't an Israel? This is what, I mean, if we removed Israel from the equation, would somehow the politics of West Asia / the Middle East all of a sudden repair itself? And would there be no radical Islamism? Would states become, if not democratic, at least open? Would there become open, expressive civil society? Would all voices be heard? I don't think so. That might be a nice myth, but I don't think it's true. Israel certainly has not helped the politics of that region. It has certainly exacerbated problems, and I do think, unfortunately, it has come to see over a period of time, and actually this is after the formation of the state. In some ways, Zionism prior to the formation of the State of Israel was a more healthy vision of trying to live within the area. There were a lot of people who had, Jews who had returned, and they seemed to want to work with the Arabs in the region. It's after the state forms and after a history of both wars and relationships that Israel has just developed a kind of mentality that says, as I think you rightly pointed out, that our strength is going to reside in the weakness of those around us. And I don't see how that is any kind of future. I mean, you cannot build relationships that are healthy with states that you have participated in weakening. That's not going to work. And I do think that's a very serious problem. I don't think the U.S. is supportive of that, but we have not done enough to stand up to Israel over the years. And we have our own politics well, anybody who has just watched the recent visit of Netanyahu to the U.S. In defiance of the current president, and the amount of duplicity of Netanyahu to be willing in the last moment to make a statement about not allowing on his watch, if he's elected, to see a Palestinian state come into existence, and then just within the past 24 hours seemingly take it back. I mean, what can one say about that? I mean, there's just not enough to say about it to critique. But again, Israel is a problem, but this is so multifaceted. So can we remove Israel and will it go away? No. Could we remove Saudi Arabia and its funding for Wahhabi-like ideas? If you remove them from the equation, would this all go away? I don't think it would all go away either. But might it improve? Yes, it would probably improve a great deal. And it would improve a great deal if, and I guess this is where some of the rhetoric back and forth, democracy isn't the answer to all the world's problems. But I would say that open societies can be an answer to problems. How one goes about negotiating from an open society to who the ruling class is going to be, and how those ruling classes are going to be replaced should they not do their jobs. We can talk around the world, the word democracy. We could talk about civil society instead if that makes people feel better. In some ways it makes me feel better because the West version of democracy is not something that is necessarily either exportable or easily recreated in other situations. People have to recreate their own versions of open societies. That's how, they have to do that themselves. But clearly the Arab world has a problem with dealing with openness and difference. It has a problem with inclusivity. And I don't mean just Sunni Shia. I mean it has a problem with bringing in all levels of class from a socioeconomic standpoint. It's got a problem dealing with this. And the elites that have ruled this region since the mid part of the 20th century have been reluctant to give up any kind of power. They've been very comfortable economically, and no one is giving up power. And this is where I do fault U.S. policy. It has been content with security and stability, with overall relations and willingness to support people who are willing to suppress their own people in order to maintain that security. And that's a dangerous recipe, and we are seeing the results of this, the blowback of this on the West. It is clear. I mean, we can't escape this. And I think that's the geopolitical nature of this, is that we are involved with this, and this is going to be impacting us. Granted, we are at a distance, but we are involved with this just as much as the people in the Middle East, West Asia, as the people there are. We're not suffering the same way that they are in terms of the economic conditions, but our own future rests on getting some kind of transitional politics in play that will allow us to feel that we don't have to control things. As the conversation was going here, I don't know how many of you have read the 9/11 Commission report that emerged in 2006, a kind of U.S.-produced document that was assessing 9/11. And one of the by the way, it's an amazing document, incredibly well written and very analytic, and I think very critical of the U.S. and Western policy. But one of the problematic statements, and I think it goes to play what we've talked about here, one of the problematic statements is that in the current world, this is almost a direct quote from the Commission report, the American homeland is the globe. Very interesting quote. The American homeland is the globe. Now that could be taken in a rather positive way, that we need to see ourselves as part of the world, but it also can be interpreted in an incredibly negative way, and that is, in order for us to be secure, we have to be able to control the globe. And I think it's clear that in American politics, we are split on just how that's going to play out. I mean, and you can see it in the debates that occur, and it's going to come up in the upcoming election, and you're going to see American politicians who are going to use what's happening in that region. They're going to use the war on terrorism, and yes, they're going to use Muslims and they're going to use Islam, and it's going to make for political fodder for a variety of groups. And I can tell you that whoever takes over the Democratic seat after Obama, whoever's going to be running, is going to be trying to deal with the feedback of the blowback of Obama not being articulate enough to the pleasure of many of the Republicans, that he's not being anti-Islam enough, that he's not putting the blame on Islam, that he's trying to be a little bit more judicious about this. And this kind of politics is everywhere. So this is not, I don't care to put the blame on one particular group, mainly because I see the politics that's being played with the war on terror. It's not something just between the West and that region and the rest of the world. It's happening within these countries. So the Egyptian rulers are also using the war on terror. And the rulers in the Middle East, they have used 9/11 as a pretext to crack down on their own people and to argue to Western powers, the US in particular, that they need more money for security issues to crack down on their own populations and to control them. And they will say things abroad in the West, to me, it's an embarrassment. How could an Arab leader go abroad? Al-Sisi was just interviewed by Der Spiegel 2 weeks ago, in which he is talking about the immaturity of Egyptian people. I mean, what kind of leader goes abroad and says this kind of thing, and then going back home and talks about the West and the West interference? Two different voices, two different communities, playing the kind of games. The West should support me because I'm going to help fight the war on terror. You see the kind of terrorists I have to deal with, these Muslim brothers, IS, they're all of the same piece. You should be thankful for me that I'm going to stand up for them. The fact that I'm authoritarian, well, you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? I mean, that's the kind of argument. This is not just a Western issue. This is not just an Arab issue. The guilt is so widespread and is so deep that to try to put it on one group or on one particular set of factors, I wish it were that easy. I really do.
Thank you. Yeah, Prof.
Should remain at the level of a dialogue between 2 or 3 or 4 persons. Everyone else should be involved. But if you'd allow me, Mr. Chairman, just to respond to a couple of your points, Jeff. Number one, about Israel. It is a point of tremendous significance that Israel has been involved in every war in West Asia since it was established in 1948. 48, 49, 56, the Suez War, where Israel, as you know, took the side of Britain and France against the United States in the case of.
Can we get credit for that? Just so,
Well,
okay. At least temporarily.
Hold on for a while. But the point one is making is, that Israel has been involved in every war in that region. It has been a major source of violence, bloodshed, and instability. Now, the second point related to what you said about Israel, Jeff, about Zionism before the creation of the state of Israel. It's true that you had voices like Martin Buber, the great Jewish philosopher, who made it very explicit in his writings in the 30s, especially his correspondence with Mahatma Gandhi, where this is something which is not often highlighted. Gandhi was a very strong supporter of the rights of the Arabs and of Palestine. In his correspondence with Martin Buber, he said that you should not create a state in that part of the world at the expense of the rights and the dignity of the Arab people. And Martin Buber replied to him by saying that he personally also believes that that would be wrong, that the Jews, if they are going to return to that region, they should live in harmony with the Arabs. Now, that was a minority voice. If you look at the Israeli state that was created, or you look at all the thinkers who were behind Zionism, as a state ideology, and the people who came to establish the state like Ben-Gurion and the others, they believed in dominance and control. They were prepared to go to war. So it is something that we have to, that's right from the beginning. So this, I think, is something that we have to keep in mind. The voices you are referring to, Jeff, were the voices of sanity, but they were in the minority. Now, the other point that you made in very quick response about Arab regimes, you see, when we talk about, Arab regimes, no democracy and so on, I think there are some very critical points to keep in mind. There have been 3 occasions where the Arabs had committed themselves to democracy and who crushed those attempts. Number 1, Algeria, 1991, 1992. It was a people's movement, the Algerian Islamic Salvation Front, democracy. What happened? It was crushed with the help of Western powers, including France, as far as Algeria is concerned. Number 2 is Hamas, 2006. The Carter mission said that the elections held in the West Bank and Gaza at that time together, it was the freest, the most democratic election that he had witnessed. Hamas comes to power. Clear majority. What happened after that? Sanctions, boycott, attempt to crush Hamas. So here again, the democratic will, but the will is crushed by various powers, including, of course, regional actors and Western powers. Third occasion, Morsi comes to power, democratic election, not allowed to establish government in the real sense, not allowed to rule. In the end, he is overthrown with the connivance of some of these actors.
Yeah.
So I think if you talk about democracy and the Arab people, I think we have to be fair. There have been occasions where they have tried, but see what had happened. And if you look outside the Arab world, two
Mossadegh.
other,
Mossadegh.
Mossadegh, that's the very example,
Yeah.
1953, in Iran,
Yeah.
a democratically elected leader, overthrown, and they installed the Shah, an autocratic feudal ruler.
Yeah.
Okay, that's Iran. The other notable example to me is Turkey. That after, that's right, Erbakan earlier on, Mustafa Erbakan, but after Erdogan, over a period of 10 years, they had struggled to strengthen democracy, including, the present Justice and Development Party, the way in which they had very gently but very intelligently pushed the military back into the barracks. But what is happening now? You find that there are attempts to undermine the Erdogan government, partly because of Israel. It is because of the apology that Israel was forced to give, and at the same time, Turkey is quite strong as far as the question of Israel is concerned. So you find that there's this attempt. So I think it is very sad what is happening. If you look at it in terms of the changes that have taken place and changes which may take place in the future, I wouldn't want to fault the people in the region. I don't think it is the Arabs or it is the Turks or the Iranian people. I think they are capable of establishing decent regimes and good governance and all the rest of it. But there are all these forces which have undermined